welcome students. This is our first day in our world religions class. In this class, we're going to be studying major world religions such as Islam. We'll take a look at Hinduism, Buddhism. We'll take a look at some minor religions as well. But starting off this class, we're going to study two major world religions, which are Judaism and Christianity. And within this study, we're going to look at just basic fundamentals of these religions, what they believe and why, and some features of the particular religious books they use. I know many people here come from different religious backgrounds, so this class is not to convert anyone to any religious belief or to say one is better than the other, but to simply look at what they believe and why. That'll help you understand better, and we'll look at their books from a literary standpoint, how they read and why they're different as far as the way they're structured. And we'll compare those books to other books of literature that we'll study throughout the class. One aspect of many cultures' religious books is they speak about origins. Every people want to know their history, the background, and the question that many times has been asked throughout the history of cultures and religions is, where did this culture come from, or where did people in general come from? And probably the three most often asked questions in all history are, where did I come from, why am I here, and where am I going? And most religious books in some way at least take up the question of where people come from. And what are some of the different ideas you guys have as far as where, or that you've heard, like where did the world come from, how did the world get started, where did people come from? What are some of the different ideas that are out there? If someone just asked you, how do you think you got here on this planet? How would you answer? And there's no right or wrong answer. We're just looking at what different people believe is the explanation for how they got here.
Like the Big Bang?
Yes, the Big Bang Theory. What is the Big Bang Theory? Do you know, Rosemary?
Big Bang Theory
Right.
is a TV show.
It's a TV show, yes. Most people know it's a TV show, and I guess the nerdy guys
I
in
like Sheldon.
it. Okay, oh yeah, people know real well. But do you know what like Big Bang Theory refers to like, from a scientific standpoint?
Like a bomb or something. Bomb the earth and create the earth, the planet, or anything.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's believed that there's a big cosmic explosion billions of years ago, and as things shattered and went throughout the universe, things formed together, and our planet Earth is part of that, and human beings are part of that result of the explosion. Any other ideas? Big Bang Theory?
And the God created the earth, the heaven, and the human beings. Yes.
Yes, very good. The other predominant idea is that we are not here by the result of explosion, but instead here by the result of there being a God that created us. And most religions take the viewpoint that we're created, or we're here on purpose, and especially Judaism and Christianity. They're rooted on the idea that we are created. In fact, we'll look at the very distinctive views of God and creation as represented within the book of Genesis. And throughout our study in the semester, we'll look at how other religions view creation or the beginning of the world, because they all have different starting points, but there's also some points that are very similar within each religion. Just the goals of this study, we're going to be looking at what makes Genesis very different, what is revealed in the book of Genesis, and what Christianity and Judaism look to in Genesis. We'll look at some key vocabulary words in Genesis. We'll look at key people. We'll introduce you to people like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Adam and Eve, Noah. These are all people that many people have heard of in some way, especially people like Noah or Adam and Eve, but don't know much about. But they're central figures in the book of Genesis. So we'll look at that, and then we'll look at some of the features within the book of Genesis. We'll just look at chapter 1 in this morning's class, and we'll just read maybe through half of it and just kind of see how it reads a little bit. So go ahead and take out your books. Your Bible will be your textbook for at least this section of the class, and just look at Genesis chapter 1. And we're just going to look at the first verse, which is probably one of the most well-known verses in the Bible, but it probably is the most pivotal verse to Christianity and Judaism. Elisa, would you like to read just verse 1?
Okay. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Okay, very good, Lisa, thank you. This is a key verse because it tells us almost everything we need to know about about the very basic beliefs of two world religions, that is Christianity and Judaism. Both Judaism and Christianity, as you see here on the PowerPoint, are based upon Genesis. The verse reads, "In the beginning, God did what?"
What?
God did what? What does the verse say? In the beginning, God did what? And this goes back to what you said earlier, Rosemary.
It created the heavens and the earth.
Right, he created the heavens and the earth. So here, Christianity and Judaism both have this shared belief that we were put here on purpose by a God, and that God can be known and understood. In fact, the verse that starts out, "In the beginning, God created." It doesn't even say many gods created, like in mythology, like we studied last semester. There's a belief there's multiple gods. The distinct view of Christianity and Judaism is there's just one God, and that God created things. Here's some very particular aspects as we kind of go into the lesson about the way Genesis reads. It presents what's called a theological viewpoint about the beginning of the world. Genesis presents God as the beginning of history. In fact, the word Genesis. In fact, anyone know what the word Genesis means? I think you want to remember the Star Trek movie a few years ago. They were involved in what was called the Genesis Project, and that word is used every once in a while. I think there's a car even out with the name Genesis. It simply means the beginning. So here, the book of Genesis, with Judaism and Christianity, presents God as the beginning of all history. In the beginning, the idea is that God's always been there, but also that this God who's always been there is also all-powerful. That he can simply, as we'll read here in just a minute, speak a world into existence, which is a very distinctive view in contrast to with mythological gods. But again, this is the fundamental belief of Christianity and Judaism. So if you're trying to figure out what are these religions about, what do they believe, fundamental to both is that there's a God that created this world. Which takes us to our next thought, which refers to just a study of, I think that's pronounced cosmogony. Genesis presents the world as being made by God. And that key word is created, which has all kinds of implications. When someone sees a beautiful skyscraper with very ornate windows, very unique structure, what question people often ask when they see some beautiful building that's very ornate and nice to look at? What's one of the first questions someone might ask about that building and how it got there and why it looks so nice?
Who built it?
Right, who built it?
Yeah.
Who designed it? Because they believe they see in that building evidence that someone did this. That an explosion didn't cause it, but by someone put it there, and someone designed it to look a certain way. And here, the book of Genesis to Judaism and Christianity takes on that view, that this world looks like someone made it. And then the book of Genesis simply says, yes, that's exactly what happened. Someone made it. What's interesting in the book of Genesis is the book doesn't attempt to make a scientific case for creation. It simply says this is what happened, and then science argues back and forth on whether or not that can be validated or true. And that's where, as we study all religious books in our literary portion of the class, we're going to see in the first chapter of Genesis, it does not read like a science book. In fact, it won't even attempt to explain scientifically creation. It will simply describe it. And we're going to read the next probably 5 or 6 verses. And I want you just as students to think about the way these verses read from a literary standpoint. How do they describe creation? Because you'll notice it's not a scientific description, but it's a very structured description that has some type of literary form, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So Rosemary, if you would, Elisa read verse 1, read probably verses 2 through 6, and just listen closely, students, as Rosemary reads that, and try to notice a pattern. Look for things that are said repeatedly, or simply if it's said in a special way, something like that. That's our literary focus of the class. So go ahead and look at that, Rosemary.
Verse.
Yeah, verse 2 through 6.
Okay.
Yeah, and read it nice and slow for everybody.
Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." Do we need to go on?
Read one more verse,
Okay.
just one more.
So God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it, and it was so.
Okay, students, think for just a moment, not about whether or not you believe it happened this way or not, but just notice the way those verses read and the way the beginning of the world is being described. What do you notice, or what captures your attention? Like if either it's something unusual, or maybe something beautiful in the way it's described, something that is described versus maybe what's left out that you would like to know. Because we're trying to look at this just from a literary standpoint, just like we looked at mythology and the way it reads, just like we've looked at different works of fiction. Now we're looking at the Bible just to see the way it reads. What do you notice just about the way it was written? It's kind of unusual or different or maybe beautiful or at least interesting to you.
The way?
Yeah, just the way it's written. Even if you don't believe it's true, just the way it's written. Or if you don't know if it's true or not. Okay. And remember, this is a beginning of the world being described. Think about that.
You mean?
Yeah. And you may not, maybe nothing stands out. And that might be the point too. But if you see something that, hey, that's kind of interesting, what do you think? And again, there's no right or wrong answer. Just something that, compared to maybe other books and the way they would describe the beginning of the world or something like that. Any ideas? This is, again, if there's nothing that stands out, that might be the very point.
I like one of the, how do you say, sentence?
Yeah, why? What do you see?
I like this one, and it's in the verse 2, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters.
Okay, what's interesting to you about that statement?
I can imagine the picture of it, so it's very glory. Yeah, it's very special because the Spirit of God is invisible. We cannot see it, but it was hovering over the waters, so it's like a beautiful world.
Yes, okay, you captured a perfect aspect of literature, Rosemary, where literature is designed to capture your imagination. And what's interesting about the book of Genesis from a literary standpoint is its historical narrative. It presents itself as history, even if you disagree whether or not it's true or not. It's still written as history, but it's history written well. It has these very picturesque images, like the Spirit of God hovering over the water, where it captures your imagination, but yet you think maybe if you know the Bible in other parts, well, that's how God's invisible. Well, here His Spirit, though, is seen hovering over the water. Yeah, so there's kind of an element of mystery there, too, which is true in all literature. It's mysterious, it's kind of beautiful. Another thing that a lot of people notice is how brief the beginning of the world is described here. And clearly it's not described scientifically. It simply says God did this. He did this. It's very concise. It's structured to be that way. The first day could have been described in 5 to 10 pages. Instead, it's just described in 2 or 3 verses. So it's very short. So here you see it there's a structured reading of it. That as you read on through Genesis, you'll find that things are very concise, very briefly described, and not explained. Like you notice, Rosemary, okay, the Spirit of God moved over the water, but yet it doesn't describe how. You're just kind of left to think about that. And all good literature does that. Even history, when written well, makes it so that you as the reader are compelled to think about it. All good books that you read start out. If you read the Lord of the Rings books, if you read